Good evening y bienvenidos to Chicago Tonight Latino Voices. I'm Alex Hernandez of Noticias Univision Chicago, which airs every weekday morning at 5 and 6. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. On the show tonight, an update on the more than 3,000 migrants who have been sent to Chicago in the last 2 months. Community reaction to a weekend of gun violence and street takeovers in Brighton Park. Learn about the flower native to Mexico that adorns ofrendas for Dia de Muertos.
There's a tour guide who's explaining what you're looking at.
And remembering the dead and celebrating life at the annual Dia de Muertos exhibit at the National Museum of Mexican Art in Pilsen. All that coming up. But our first story tonight. Officials say the city's shelter system is at a breaking point. An update on housing options for migrants right after this.
Chicago Tonight, Latino Voices, is made possible in part by the support of these donors.
Well, local organizations say the arrival of migrants from Texas has slowed in Chicago. The city is still finding ways to assist the more than 3,000 migrants already here. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is asking older people to identify potential locations to shelter the migrants, including vacant warehouses and big box stores. This, as city officials say, Chicago's shelter system has been stretched to its breaking point. Joining us now with updates are Erendira Rendon, Vice President of the Immigrant Justice at the Resurrection Project, and Nubia William, also Chicago's Chief Engagement Officer. Thank you both for joining us. And I want to start with you, Nubia. Can you tell us or give us an update on the number of migrants already in the city and how they're doing?
Absolutely. So the city has received over 3,500 individuals and families since August 31st of 2022. We have been able to create an infrastructure that is both city and community led with the state and the county to ensure that we're providing folks with necessary supports such as shelter, food, medical care, clothing to help them really sort of get settled. They come from a very traumatizing experience, both at the border to get to the border and the bus ride to the city, to make sure that they're able to stabilize before they decide and understand what their next phase is.
I heard you mentioned medical assistance, but counseling, legal services, any type of other guidances that they're receiving?
Absolutely. So we're providing wraparound services as much as we can, and we are so grateful to our community partners, the Resurrection Project being one of them, who have been on the ground since day one, also greeting the new arrivals and providing that legal assessments, those sort of case management services and support systems that are really direly needed.
Erendira, your organization is also helping assisting immigrants on the ground. What are some of their needs and concerns?
Yeah, I mean, as folks arrive, there's definitely the immediate medical need, making sure that folks are, safe, healthy, and, the city of Chicago does provide an ambulance at the arrival site, as well as then Cook County Health steps in the next day and provides an overall comprehensive medical assessment. Then folks really just need to be able to eat and sleep.
Right.
And make sure that they have the basic needs like food and, clothing. And then eventually folks do have questions around their legal status, how they can find work.
Right. And regarding that, what's the next step for legal assistance for these immigrants right now?
Yeah, I mean, up until this point, immigrants have been receiving what is called a legal orientation. So folks are being given their rights, as well as they're explained to them how to change their address with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, how to do what's called ICE check-ins, so making sure that ICE knows where you're at. And now we really need to get to the point where we're doing a more comprehensive screening, asking the person, having each individual sit down with an attorney and try to see what are the legal avenues to be able to perhaps apply for asylum, perhaps they have family who are U.S. citizens, and really be able to then move them along the path.
Right. Nubia, Mayor Lightfoot is asking members in the city council to identify warehouses or big box stores to shelter either 500 to 1,000 migrants. What's the update on that?
So I think folks need to know that at the beginning of this bus initiative, as buses were arriving, we were seeing between 3 to 5 a day. And that really required an ability to quickly structure these shelters within the city space And some of them were normal traditional shelter spaces. Some of them are what we call ad hoc. They weren't traditionally shelter spaces, but we were able to use them to make sure that folks could be sheltered, fed, cleaned, and be able to really have some care and respite. And so because of that, we're going through the inventory of the city, trying to see what is feasible to be able to shelter folks up to 100, 200 at a time, because we were receiving so many people on a daily basis. And so we did request for folks to look through their wards to say, what would be a possibility, so that we could start doing that investigation.
Right.
Simply because the location is empty doesn't mean it's going to be feasible. And so we do have to say and know what inventory we have on hand.
Should the mayor have asked for this help identifying these warehouses or these locations before?
We asked at the appropriate time. We had been able to look at our inventory within the city spaces, and certainly folks have reached out ahead of time. We brief many of the aldermen on a weekly basis, so folks were aware in situation. And so we put out this call just to make sure folks knew that we were looking to sort of up the next level of a larger, bigger space, as we saw that this flow was going to continue.
There were also rumors that a closed side school in the 20th ward would be used to house migrants. Is that true?
So that location that I believe you're referring to is actually not going to be used. Again, we were investigating options to ensure that we knew what was available. Okay.
Erendira, going back with you, are migrants moving out of these shelters? What's happening there? I know there some are in shelters, others in hotels. What's the next steps for these migrants?
Yeah, I mean, there's all, folks are all in different stages of how much family they have in the U.S. So we do have migrants that arrive and they have family perhaps in other states or in other cities. And so then we coordinate with folks that need to get picked up. Maybe their family lives in the suburbs or lives in Chicago and they get picked up. And then, if they have to go elsewhere, the, Catholic Charities does assure that they get to their final location to meet up with their families. And then there are individuals that don't have a family unit in the U.S. And so they're staying at the shelters, they're staying at the hotels until they're able to go through the regular channels of finding an apartment, right? Sometimes that means finding a roommate within the folks that you're living with at the shelters or the hotels. And it also means being able to find a job, and that all takes time. And so we do expect that with time, folks will be able to do that. This is not the first wave of immigrants that have ever come. I came when I was 4. My parents also didn't necessarily have their month 2 plan, but it does take a little bit of time for folks to be able to then find an apartment.
And it won't be the last, right? That's for sure. So, Nubia, what next steps is the city doing to welcome even more immigrants to the city?
Absolutely. Resettlement is the word that we float around here all of the time. How can we help people stabilize and stay here and really build a happy and healthy life? As opposed to folks that come in as refugees but have attached to certain rights and benefits, this group is different and they don't have that support system. And normally the city is as involved in this type of support, but we see an opportunity to be able to help community, not just those that arrived on the buses, but those that are coming for the same reason from different places. So we are excited to see what this next stage is going to be.
We have less than 30 seconds, but I want to ask about the city that's accepting new clothes through a rapid response wish list. In which other ways can people help?
Absolutely. We've been so grateful for folks wanting to help. And really the best way is those donations. We really want to give folks clean clothes, new clothes, like we all deserve. We really need winter items, especially for adults. We have lots of coats for kids, which is very helpful, but we have a lot of adults, men and women in the city that we need to be able to care for. So those winter items would be incredibly helpful. We also do have some opportunities for volunteering, and folks, if they visit chicago.gov/support, they can get more info there.
Thank you. We have some information also on the screen. Our thanks to Erendira Rendon and Nubia Williams.
Thank you.
Up next, updates on an outbreak of violence on the city's southwest side. Stay with us. A deadly wave of gun violence rocked the Brighton Park community on the city's southwest side last weekend. Saturday evening, 2 teenagers were shot, one fatally, near Washtenaw and Fairfield Avenues. A street takeover at Archer and Kitsy Avenues in the early hours on Sunday, October 23rd, ended in gunfire that killed 3 young men and injured 2 more. Later that same day, 2 more people were injured in a drive-by shooting just a few blocks away at Western and 47th Avenue. Joining us now with more are Arturo Carrillo, Deputy Director of Health and Violence Prevention for Brighton Park Neighborhood Council, and Mayra Avila, Board President of the Southwest Collective. I want to thank you both for joining us, but I want to start with you, Arturo. Can you tell us a little bit about the Brighton Park community?
Yeah, Brighton Park is a working class community. It's a predominantly Latino, Mexicano immigrant community, and it's very much made up of working class families who are trying to make do with all the resources they have available to make sure that they give the best lives for their children and their families.
Okay, saying that, is gun violence a concern in Brighton Park? Has it been before?
Yeah, it's unfortunately a constant reality of our community. We of course mourn every life that is lost by gun violence in our community. We know there's so much more that could be done, and we are definitely working to do more.
Right. Mayra, these street takeovers, unfortunately, have been increasing in the city, but this is the first time one has ended in a fatal shooting. How often is Brighton Park the site of these takeover events?
I think that predominantly the Southwest side and Black and Latino communities are highly affected by this. It has been happening more frequently. There is an increase in violence. My belief is that some of this may be coming from desperation from the youth. We have been locked up for the past 3 years due to COVID. And they unfortunately do not have many resources and outlets to be able to express themselves, go out and do some activities that are available at other communities.
Right. Do you think the shooting resulted from the street takeover?
I cannot say that it did. I don't think so. This is the only one that I have heard that has resulted in a shooting.
Okay. Arturo, Chicago police said, well, all 3 of the young men who were killed had gang affiliations rather. Are gangs particularly a problem in Brighton Park?
So, we often take issue with the fact that, early reports by police indicate gangs as the reason. They always default for that. Unfortunately, that isn't always verified, and we know that there's multiple reasons people get shot in the city of Chicago. We know that unfortunately disenfranchised youth are more likely to be impacted by violence and also cause violence on others. And so for us, we know that under-resourced communities have violence as an issue, and it's not always related to gangs. So we really want to be careful with that narrative.
Okay, that's interesting, and it's good that you say that. Mm-hmm. What has been the response from the community after the shootings?
Yeah, well, we try to do more. We always look at these opportunities to bring attention to why more investment has to be made in our communities, right? Brighton Park is a community that can often be overlooked because there's, of course, other parts of the city that deal with higher volumes of gun violence. Right. But we know that no one's completely protected from the realities of Chicago where we have so many guns on the streets, right? So what we know is that this is a moment for us to do more, to ask for more resources to be invested in order for us to be able to prevent these situations from occurring. Right,
and I was just going to ask you that. What is your organization looking for in the city in order to help prevent events like this?
Yeah, we need more investment in prevention. We see it as an opportunity now more than ever to think about how we're funding these sort of structures of care that our communities need. When you think about how much money is invested by the city in violence prevention, it's only $85 million. That may sound like a lot to your viewers, but when you put that side by side with how much we're spending on police, that's $2 billion versus $85 million to prevent, right? So if the $2 billion that we are investing in police would be keeping us safe, this would not have occurred, but it's not working, right? So what we're looking for now is more substantial investments in our communities so we could have frontline workers responding to youth, to young adults, to be able to intervene at an earlier moment before these shootings occur.
Mayra, would you agree? What would you like to see the city do more of?
I think that we need more funding for mental health, violence prevention. It's also important that our youth has stable job opportunities, and that should also include DACA and immigrant youth. I know there are some programs that the city offers for youth to have summer jobs, but unfortunately, some of those do not cover our DACA and our immigrant communities, including those that have items.
We know investment can be, a long-term solution. What would you like, the city and the police to do in the immediate future?
I think that we need to have some counseling program for our kids, some including therapy sessions, group programs that are available to the youth to be able to express themselves and have a safe place to go to ask questions. If they're receiving peer pressure from from their peers, have an outlet to go to and talk to them. But it's important that we have those resources.
Right. Can you talk about how the mental health interventions you want to see more can help prevent events like this?
Yeah, so actually, through the Southwest Collective, we have teamed up with Paz Interior Counseling, and they are a group of therapists that will be offering therapy sessions for kids 16 to 19. So we will be focusing on topics such as how to handle peer pressure, relationships, schools, and substance abuse, among other topics. So I'm glad to do that as well.
Thank you. Arturo, we know crime and violence also affects business owners. What are they saying about what's happening?
Well, no one wants to see this happening in their community. We know that violence, of course, impacts not only businesses, but families, individuals, schools, right? So the ripple effects of violence are really felt by everyone in the community, and we want this to not continue to happen anymore. Definitely.
I think that's the feeling about the whole community. I want to thank you both for joining us today, Arturo Carrillo and Mayra Avila. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Back with more Chicago Tonight Latino Voices right after this. Dia de Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is a traditional Mexican holiday that remembers loved ones who are no longer with us. Chicago Tonight visited the National Museum of Mexican Art, where for the 36th year, they are presenting an ever-changing art exhibit that celebrates love and loss. Producer Mark Vitale has the story.
The installation is an ofrenda, an offering in tribute to early movies from Mexico. It honors the films, their stars, and the widespread influence of Mexican cinema throughout the Americas. It was made by Puerto Rican artist Antonio Martorell, who moved this massive artwork off the island on the last flight before the hurricane. This year's Day of the Dead exhibition blends the contemporary with the traditional. Its somber tone is meant to be a reflection of the world at large.
Every year, the exhibition is unique. The artists oftentimes create work that responds to the events of that year, right? Whatever's happening in Chicago, whatever's happening in the country or the world, artists create pieces that deal with those events. I like to think that the gallery walls are mirrors of our community, where we can see ourselves, where our celebrations and our joys appear, as well as our struggles and the things that we are being challenged with, whether it's political or cultural. Oftentimes, in Pilsen, what you hear being spoken about in cafes or in churches or in bars ends up as the subject matter in works of art on our walls.
One installation comes from Chicago's Ukrainian Institute of Modern Art. It's a remembrance of those who've died in the Ukraine-Russia war. The school shooting in Uvalde, Texas is commemorated in a work created with students from Moose Elementary in Humboldt Park. Photos capture artwork from years past that also recognized those killed by gun violence.
It's time to do something. It's time to stop being passive or quiet or politically correct or whatever you want to call it, and it's time to sort of start protesting what is happening in our country, what's happening in our communities across the United States. Those feelings of anger and helplessness really floated to the surface in curating this year's exhibition. The rest of the exhibition sort of takes on the regular sort of recipe, which is a lot of folk art. The traditional artists of Mexico always celebrate Day of the Dead in a way that is linked to the past. Photography shows what's happening in Mexico today, how people are celebrating it, whether it's Los Angeles or somewhere in Oaxaca. And then, of course, the installations that people create, the ofrendas or site-specific pieces, again, that commemorate those who are no longer here and really look with hope to a life after death. Whether it be a Christian view or an ancient indigenous view, it's this understanding of the universal and an embracing of the fact that life continues and those who are no longer with us continue with us.
Some honor the lives of community members gone too soon. This altar is an homage to Nieves Orozco, an artist's model to the great Mexican painter Diego Rivera. Much has changed since the museum first presented the exhibition in the 1980s.
36 years ago, when we first started displaying the Day of the Dead and celebrating it here in Pilsen, a lot of people did not understand what it was. We would get a lot of phone calls of people wondering if it was something evil, was it satanic, was it, it has the word dead in it, and that's not a very popular word in this country, in this society. I think people now realize that it's actually life that we're celebrating on an annual basis here. And without a doubt, this museum has really helped educate people and make the Day of the Dead celebration a part of Chicago's traditions.
For Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, this is Mark Vitale.
This year's Dia de Muertos exhibition is called Memories and Offerings. It is in Pilsen at the National Museum of Mexican Art through December 11th. The Day of the Day holiday is celebrated on November 1st and 2nd. There's more to see on our website as well. Actually, you might have noticed the bright orange and yellow flowers adorning some of the ofrendas in the Dia de los Muertos exhibit. Those are cempasúchiles, which are native to Mexico and bloom at this time of the year just in time for the holiday. Fresh cempasúchiles, however, can be tough to find here in Chicago in time for Dia de los Muertos. But producer Erika Gunderson spotted them just outside Albany Park Floral Shop and stopped in to find out more.
The Dia de los Muertos holiday is celebrated across Latin America, but it's most strongly associated with Mexican culture.
I am from Ecuador. Most of the people do it in Ecuador, in Peru, in Colombia, and here in the United States because, Mexican people is everywhere. So they take the tradition where they go.
Albany Park floral designer Blanca Tiro says a few years ago, a customer stopped in hoping to pick up a crucial element of the Mexican Dia de los Muertos tradition, cempasúchiles, also known as marigolds.
When I opened the business, I didn't know about this kind of flowers. The first year when I started selling, because, one customer asking, hey, you have a cempasúchil? I say, no, I don't have it. She say, why? I say, because I don't know for what they use it. He say, in Mexican, because this is a Mexican tradition. He say, in Mexican we do the altar. It's very important this flower be in the altar.
The belief is cempasúchil's bright color and strong fragrance help guide the souls of the departed to their family's home for their annual reunion.
You feel in your heart they are here. They are here every year. So that's, the tradition.
Well, again, the Day of the Day holiday is celebrated November 1st and 2nd. Tito's Flowers and Gifts in Albany Park will be selling cempasúchiles all the way through the holiday, so you can go and find them. And that's our show for this weekend. Be sure to check out our website, WTTW.com/news, for the very latest from WTTW News, including our guide to Chicago's fall festivals. And with early voting actually officially underway in all 50 wards, check out our comprehensive WTTW voter guide, which is now live on our website. It features a countdown to Election Day, a rundown of local races, And you can hear from the candidates in their own words on why they want your vote. And on our WTTW News Explained series, breaks down exactly what happens to your ballot after you vote. Just go to WTTW.com/voter guide and you'll have it all at your fingertips. Don't forget also to tune in to Noticias Univision Chicago every weekday morning. I'll be waiting for you. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight Latino Voices, I'm Alex Hernandez. Thank you for sharing part of your weekend with us. Buenas noches.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that supports free educational initiatives in the legal profession.